Welcome to the secret world.
'Twas right, said they, such birds to slay, that bring the fog and mist.
They say they'll be my muse, my masterpiece, my Pulitzer, all access, all coke and BJ's.
It's a tough time out there for MMOs. There hasn't been much in the way of innovation in the last few years, but developer Funcom have taken what they learned from Age of Conan and created something very different indeed.
As usual, you start with customizing your character. You won't actually see your gear represented though, except for your weapons. You get clothing rewards throughout the game, but you also get to go shopping in London. There's something nice about everyone looking so different, Barjo.
Yeah, I've always wanted that in an MMO, and there are some crazy outfits to strive for too.
Spoiler alert, we'll fight, I'll win, you'll track me down again, just in time to watch your world tumble into chaos.
The story here is about three secret societies in a power struggle in the midst of a mythical invasion of unholy beasties that have rolled in with a mysterious fog. You have been marked by a weird magical bee to have magical powers. The Dragon are an Asian society that revel in chaos, the Templars are all about structure and discipline, and the Illuminati are focused on corporate manipulation. I love the Illuminati Hex. They're the most hilarious faction, especially those one-liners when you're walking around the headquarters.
Misuse of reply to all is a downsizing offense.
I was really drawn to the Dragon. They just seemed more mystical and less rigid. Although the story started out a bit weird. For example, I'd just met this woman when... Nice to meet you? The writing is mostly excellent though if you allow the cutscenes to play out. There's so many great creepy characters and scenarios. And while I do miss that interactivity of Star Wars The Old Republic, being able to, hear my own voice in a cutscene and make dialogue choices, there's still lots of really interesting ideas here.
It's still out there. Carter and I have had the same dream, and it's a doozy. The harvest at Henderson's farm. Swollen and churning with lava and disease.
Yeah, and some of the cutscenes and dialogue had a real Twin Peaks vibe to it, which is just, it's beyond awesome.
You cannot vivisect a ghoul without breaking a few legs.
In fact, the whole game has a dark, eerie, moody atmosphere. There's the beautiful ambient music, classic zombie locales, inspired character design, and every now and then the questing will take a strange and affecting turn. And it's just wonderful to have an MMO set in a modern setting, and it's so beautiful. The level of detail in this game is immense, especially if you're running in DirectX 11. You'll see the moonlight coming through the trees and those beautiful water effects and all the fog and particle effects.
Yeah, plus the animations of all the monsters are top notch, with some incredible sound design to their screams and gurgles. It scales okay-ish for older PCs, but you'll want to pump this one up nice and high if you can. We did have a few performance issues and crashing, which is frustrating. But I think a lot of those issues were few and far between. The best part about the locations is that no area feels the same. Each creature and mob placement is on purpose. Each zone feels like it's been crafted with deep thought behind it, relevant to what's going on. Whether it be a swampy coast or a lookout full of zombies, or the dusty sands of Egypt, you don't feel like enemies are just standing around. They have a reason to be there. And you definitely feel like you're part of a living world.
Yeah. One big thing which no MMO has done before that I've played, there are no levels. What? Your level, inverted commas, is determined by the quality level of the gear you have and how many points you put into a progression line of abilities and skills. This means you have to keep an eye on your gear and make sure it's all up to scratch all of the time, otherwise you might hit an area which is a bit too difficult and you'll have to go back and do some older quests. And I love this Hex. There's nothing worse than an easy MMO. It's just pointless.
Yeah, I loved it too. I mean, this is an MMO for MMOs, and even the first area will test your skills a bit. It is actually really fun going back and repeating content with friends too, because you'll always find quests you've missed. But it doesn't punish you too much for repeating stuff. You'll still get plenty of reward out of it, which is something that MMOs never do, and also isn't grindy like Conan was. The next thing to get your head around is that there are no classes. What?
What's going on?
Your role is dependent on the gear, weapons, or magic you have equipped, and where you put your ability points, but it's all flexible. You can use any weapon or magical ability if you're willing to spend the points, and it's always more economical to start putting points in and out of the tree than to re-roll.
Yeah, theoretically, you could fill up that entire ring and just be a master of everything. It would take a lifetime, but I think you could do it.
Yeah, it's insane. I was gonna start with blood magic, but it looks a bit gross, so I ended up going elemental magic and blades, and I really appreciate a modern MMO that still lets me use swords and magic.
I went for assault rifle and Wolverine blades. This way I can pick off people from a distance and bring them in for a slash party. You can only have 7 active skills at any time and 7 passive abilities. Higher abilities are often slightly more powerful, but they're more about increasing strategy and crossover debuffs rather than a raw power upgrade. It's an incredibly deep system, and I just love it. For example, you could take a perk off the hammer tree, take a passive crit bonus, and slot that in even if you're not using hammers. You can build the way you want to.
Can you imagine changing from a rogue to a warrior 50 hours into World of Warcraft? I mean, from what I can see, you can make a viable build with any 2 weapons you like, with enough crossover debuffs to do all right.
Yeah, in fact, I did this last night. I completely abandoned my blades and went for elementalism as my second weapon, and I just love that giant hammer. And it only took me maybe 3 or 4 hours to get that up to a working build, which in MMO time is pretty short.
Yeah, and with just a few clicks, you can switch equipment and ability sets, although that's a little bit buggy at the moment. As a former rogue, I was a little bit disappointed to see that there were no stealth options, but, you know, it's such a joy to see how many abilities you have to play with.
Yeah, and it's such a fun combat system too.
It's focused on utilising both your weapons in combat. As you fight, you'll build up a counter for both at once, and then you'll use cross-weapon abilities to spend those charges. So it's build, 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 and big attacks from both weapons while mixing in your situational abilities.
And it's just cool bringing out an assault rifle in the middle of a blade fight, you know? And I like all the ability effects too.
Yeah, and there's a massive focus on positional combat, so you're constantly moving, whether you're in a boss fight or just facing off against your average fireman zombie.
And this is what I like most about the game, Hex. You're always on your toes, always moving in combat, and it's intuitive. You understand it from those AoE waves that come out. And this makes it all just reactive. It makes you forget that it's an MMO half the time. It just looks awesome backflipping out of combat. In fact, you and I and Goose had quite a backflipping obsession for a while there.
We did. Hey, yep.
But let's talk about the quest, because it's the one thing that usually lets an MMO down, and here they have knocked it out of the park. And Hex, I know it's a big call, but I think I enjoyed these quests more than maybe any RPG I've ever played, because they just have so much augmented reality and outside-the-box thinking.
Is that it?
I don't know. There's the priest house. Aren't we looking for a priest? A sleeping priest?
I guess we are.
You'll often be searching the internet for phrases in the Bible or fake websites the developers have made for the game.
Province of kings and gods. Kings in the word of God. Kings.
Word of God is the Bible.
There are just so many twists that you don't see coming.
Oh man.
Oh man.
What a journey.
You do still have your kill 5 of this and that stuff, but there's usually something more interesting involved. And, you know, they've taken a big risk with this, but I really think it pays off, Barjo. The first few times you encounter a tricky quest, it's inherently frustrating because we're so used to MMOs just pointing out what to click. But then you find yourself starting to crave these problems, and you force yourself not to look up the answer unless you really get stuck.
Emily Chan, on her description of her employee, I think it said what she was working on.
It's easy to think that a quest is bugged, but it's actually just a bit tricky, or there's something more complex about it that you have to work out. And sometimes that can be in the interface, what you have to click, but sometimes it's much more clever. Having said that, we did find a handful of quests which didn't activate properly and required a relog to fix them. But for an MMO, it's been a relatively smooth launch.
But it's a pretty creepy basement.
There are a few ideas that get repeated throughout, but then you'll stumble on something like this giant, creepy, haunted mansion with little British children in alternate dimensions, and I don't want to talk about the quest anymore because I think it'll just spoil it for people.
The instances are exciting and for MMOs as well. Plus, they have a great spectator mode if you die. You'll have complex stages and boss fights from the get-go. Giant scary crab squid thing at the end of the first instance has a stage where you need to hide from its view or you're dead, while it sends out little lizard guys to pull you out of hiding.
Yeah, this isn't an MMO that holds your hand, and it can be quite difficult when you first sit down to play it, working out how everything works. But that's part of the joy. I love that it throws you against brick walls, and that makes it much more rewarding, I think.
There's also lots of little faction missions and solo instances that have everything from stealth and platforming puzzles to weird, spooky little X-Files situations.
Detecting heat signatures. There is activity converging on your position. One moment. Applying real-time filters.
I also love how if you have a friend on another server, you can simply teleport them into yours and play together. I mean, that's genius.
Amazing.
You can also teleport near your friends at any time if you've been to that area before, and it's just lots of little things like this make playing with your friends so easy, and we've wanted it for a long time. There is currently no world PvP, but there are some war zones. And how are you finding those, Barjo?
It's not bad. I feel like PvP is the last thing on the list for an MMO developer. There's just not enough maps, basically. There are 3 war zones right now. There's Stonehenge, which is all about domination, and a hot potato relic one too. And there's some interesting strategies that are coming out of those, but the really interesting one is this massive open zone where you can just wander about capturing resources and having little fights on the go. It's always open 24/7.
Yeah, wish you had a heal, didn't you? I got one. Oh, it's good. Oh, delicious. Delicious.
I'm only now just starting to think about a PvP build, and it's really exciting because there are so many abilities available.
There really isn't much to complain about apart from a few tiny bugs and interface issues, but all the social elements like guilds, which in this game are called cabals, are there, and there seems to be a lot of content and freedom.
Yeah, and you know, it's tough having an MMO in your life alongside all the other games that you want to play, but I just keep finding reasons to keep playing this, and I know we're in that honeymoon period where everything is amazing, but I can't see a reason to stop playing right now, which is dangerous, but awesome.
Hey there. How you doing?
Except for that MMO ability bar down the bottom, it's pretty much not an MMO, but it kind of is. Plus, jazz hand emotes.
I think they've done a really good job with this Barjo. It doesn't patronize you or handhold you, but instead offers really rich quests, strategy, and customization. So I'm giving it 9 out of 10.
Yeah, look, I think this universe won't appeal to everyone, but I think it's a masterful work. I'm giving it 9.5. Honeymoon disclaimer. Honeymoon period. 2 weeks, I might be like,
Oh God! I think
Thanks for setting us on fire. Thanks for that.